Today, I would like to speak about the stigma around mental health. Have you ever been asked about how you are doing and your response is good when you truly are having a hard time? Why don't we just answer honestly? Why are we afraid of the judgment, or are we just don't want to bother anyone? According to the National Institution of Mental Health, nearly 1 in every 5 U.S. adults suffer with a mental illness. Let's discuss the difference of type of illnesses around it. Depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, PTSD, and mood disorder are just to name a few. Today, I would like to speak on the topic as it is such a buzz topic recently in this pandemic. I think that's something that we've heard a lot about over these last couple of years. Although it has been a major problem within our community for many, many years, what COVID did was shed this light on this topic. But what can we do about it? And who does it affect? And what is it doing to our communities? My purpose here today is to simply provide my own experience of my own mental health struggles and what I experienced as a care coordinator for a senior population, and the facts of mental health and how to support these thoughts. Reflecting on my own personal mental health, I have always been a kind of high anxiety, high strung person. My point being that my anxiety kind of circled into this depression. As you can see in the screen, there are mood disorders, thought disorders, and anxiety disorders. I suffer with anxiety. But what's happening is my anxiety got so heightened that it started to circle into the depression state, where I was constantly in a form of fear within my marriage. I was working 2 jobs and having a young daughter. I was unable to focus on anything for a long period of time, often school or even having simple conversations. It was very, very difficult. It was unmanageable stress, and it was just too much, and something needed to be done. I used to wake up in a panic, dead sleep, just my heart racing, and there was just no stopping it. My heart was racing, kind of like if I was working out. I just did a marathon or ran hard or something, a hard workout, although my body was still. It was very difficult, and this is kind of known as a panic attack. That's what started a lot of that. So I eventually saw a therapist, or a psychologist, I should say, and my body and my brain were just not aligned properly, she said. She explained in this picture that I have in the document here, she explained the difference of depression and what happens. And because I have this anxiety, it circled over into the depression, like I mentioned. She brought it out and she explained it. And she's saying that my generalized anxiety continued to go into this. And if I did not manage my anxiety and my depression, what was going to happen is I was going to end up going into that gray circle, the mood disorders. It just did not happen. It was just not good. So she prescribed an antidepressant, and I also started seeing a therapist, which seemed to help. She said if I did not get those things, like I mentioned, under control, those mood disorder, that's when people start suffering with depression, with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, all these things, is because they have this underlying type of mental illness that they are not taking account for, and they are not helping, and so they're unable to manage it, and because they are, what's lying at the surface will continue to bubble up until it kind of combusts, until you have this mental breakdown. So once I started seeing the therapist, taking the medication, it did seem to help. But this dark time in my life, I had to learn how to set new boundaries for myself. I also saw for the first time, for firsthand, what isolation can do for our senior population as well, as I worked in this realm. In the peak of COVID, I was working with the seniors, and I would have to do checks on my patients weekly basis, but many of them were losing their spouse. Many of them were isolated. They were missing their families due to the pandemic, and not to mention the fear that the pandemic put onto this population. They were simply isolated and felt this loneliness, and it caused so much stress on their own mental health. The depression would just slowly take over, and for myself, it was very heart-wrenching to hear this in this population, that you could no longer go visit or any of these things due to this population, due to COVID, I should say. So I was unable to do my job how I normally would have done it, and they simply were suffering. I had to step away ultimately from this job. But I know my thoughts were, why isn't anybody talking about this? I know that COVID was very relevant, but at that time, why wasn't anybody talking about the facts of what this isolation was doing to to mental health for everyone? Numerous adults within our community were suffering. So I would like to take a moment and say, numerous older adults, communities are nervous about the public stigma that is related around mental health. Dawn and Cisneros in the Journal of Psychology of Nursing and Mental Health Services stated this. When it comes to mental health, it is spoken often, but people don't talk about it and take it seriously. It's not something we bring up at a dinner party, the importance of what's going on or what someone might be suffering with. There's so much stigma around around mental health, especially in all the cultures. But mental health does not discriminate. It does not discriminate by age, gender, race, but it seems to be less spoken about in our population of color. I personally know this. As a Hispanic woman, many people do not speak of this. This is something that I see personally in my own family. They also state that per Shirley in 2014, she stated that African American older adults are less likely to engage in treatment for mental health in the results of the stigma compared to Caucasian older men. This explains might be why what is going on in medicine, in healthcare. So my purpose today is to simply give you this perspective, and let's talk about their feelings. So when people ask, how are you doing? Let's truly respond with the correct response, how you truly are doing. Let's ask each other, let's check on each other, and let's talk about it. Thank you.